What's the most cringe thing you witnessed in public? Motorway services, 6 AM. Elderly gentleman in the toilets drying his penis with the hot air dryer, helicoptering it so the blast got all angles. Quite ruined my morning. I worked at a restaurant in Tennessee. There was a 16-year-old girl there named Candy who decided to get married in the back room of the place, with the owner of the restaurant officiating. He was also a minister. One of the waitresses, an older lady named Brenda, handed her a wrapped gift as a wedding present. Candy unwrapped it to find Brenda's used lingerie. Later on at the reception, Brenda did a very spirited karaoke performance of These Boots Were Made for Walking, while outside in the back, Candy threw the lingerie in the dumpster. Their honeymoon was a one-night stay at a Holiday Inn around the corner. But they came home because they got bored. As you can see, I can't pick a single thing from this story as most cringe, so let's just say it's the whole event. Is an office called considered public or private? About 10 years ago, edit, it was actually about 12 to 13 years ago tracking back. I had a former colleague, who actually still stalks me to this day. It's fucking weird, have a full-blown stomping tantrum in the middle of the office. Why? My manager would not send him in a business trip to a client site. Why? Because he had a full-on stomping tantrum at the client site previously. Why? Because the client PM didn't buy a tray of cookies along with the catered lunch she bought her team and my colleagues who were on site. All of this over his tantrum over cookies a year prior. It was just mind-bending watching this 33-year-old man have a toddler-like fit over it. When I was in 2nd grade, my cousin, who was in the same classroom as I, died in a horrible car accident. Now, real talk, my cousin was one of those kids that acted like a rabid animal 24/7 and would bite you when he was feeling particularly feisty, which was often. In fairness, he probably had severe, undiagnosed mental problems. No one liked him, and we all avoided him. Anyway, the school administration decided to have one of his 3 funerals at our school, with his coffin parked on the free throw line of our gym. All the girls in my classroom were forced to dress like angels and perform a choreographed dance to Amy Grant's El Shaddai while holding candles. It was a Catholic school. All the boys were forced into a processional in front of the coffin and had to place teddy bears on top of it. After the funeral, we had to go back to the classroom and talk about my cousin. Immediately, one by one, all the girls started sobbing and dramatically exclaiming they wished my cousin had been their boyfriend. All the guys were saying that my cousin was their best friend. When it came to me, I could no longer contain the cognitive dissonance and burst into tears while screaming liars. We all hated him. He was a really bad kid. He was so mean. Why are you lying? Fortunately, my teacher thought I was having a mental breakdown and gently removed me from the classroom and sent me home. So cringe. To this day, I will avoid funerals as much as possible and will doubt the truthfulness of anything positive someone says about a recently deceased person. This one's a sad cringe. Was on holiday in New Zealand and there was this street performer with a mic who was in the middle of performing a trick on a volunteer when he suddenly stops and goes, "I'm sorry, I'm just going to have to stop because there really isn't enough people and it's killing my ego. Think I'm just gonna head down to a pub and drink away my sorrows." The only audience were the volunteer's 2 family members. And the way he said it wasn't even in a petty tone. It was a genuine "I think it's time to give up" tone. Felt so bad for the guy and still cringe thinking about it. This was a couple of years ago. A young woman with cancer, old student of my then teacher, came to sing Christmas songs for us on stage before Christmas break. Keep in mind, this was a small school, maximum 150 students, all packed in a small room. She was completely tone deaf, couldn't hit a single note right, and she sang around 4 songs. Everyone smiled in silence and put on their best "you sound great" face. I nearly shat myself trying to hold in my growing urge to break out in a fit of laughter. I can't deal with stuff like that. I get hysterical. I had no ill will towards her at all, but situations like that get me laughing. Not only was she tone deaf, but everyone also trying to pretend she sounds great. It's such an awkward situation to be in. Understandable, but no less awkward. I'm glad I managed to hold it in, because had I started I wouldn't have been able to stop, and would have promptly been crucified next to the Grinch. Standing behind a guy in the Costco checkout line. He had a cart full of items to return, all of which were heavily used. Half-eaten food, a used and stained folding table, an entry door mat well-soiled, clothes. Trust me, I know that Costco has set themselves up for this. I'm well aware of their generous and mostly open-ended return policy. But it was extremely cringe for me to watch someone outright abuse it with an entire cart of stuff. I was imagining that he went back shopping around his house going, oh, that was from a Costco. This too. Yep, bought that there. Honey, take those shoes off. Didn't we get those at Costco last spring? My mother-in-law drove into a man's back with her rental scooter at Disneyland while pulling into the VIP area for the Main Street Parade. He was sitting on the curb and ignored her until his dad, right next to him, and had seen her drive into him, needed to go to the bathroom. She had parked right behind them with no room left. The dad asked her to move, and she said no, that she couldn't. She honestly could. It was that she was settled in her spot and didn't want to move her scooter. He asked if she could at least apologize for hitting his son with the scooter, and she then started a screaming match with the dad, claiming she never hit him and that he was harassing a disabled woman. The son joined in, defending his dad, which caused my father-in-law to start aggressively talking back to them. Dad and son both stop and left after a few minutes. Then father-in-law reported them to security. As far as I know, they never got in trouble, thankfully. The entire time this was happening, most of Main Street was watching us and talking. I never felt more embarrassed and ashamed to be with them in public. Worked at a bank. 2 people got caught after depositing fake checks, or they were check kiting, I don't recall, at several locations. We had an email with their pics from another branch, so my coworker recognized them and manager instructed them to stall them while they called the cops. Cops came and separated them, handcuffs and everything, so they could be questioned separately. As they were pulling her away, the woman yelled, "I love you, Alex," in the most dramatic "I'm never gonna see you again" movie line kind of way ever. I rushed to take a crap before the next train entered during my commute to work, but a younger and somewhat dim-looking fellow with a newspaper plodded to the toilet line before me. Grudgingly, I acknowledged he did indeed arrive there first and simply waited while holding in my crap with every muscle I had in my buttocks. An old man waited in line behind me. The dim fellow must have not slided the barrel bolt lock properly in, meaning the bolt missed the barrel and therefore wasn't properly locked. A gust of wind blew in through the window. The door slowly creaked open, revealing him standing there with pants down, fapping away to the newspaper picture of a celebrity. His face originally was one of pleasure and lust, suddenly contorted to one of sheer horror as he realized what had happened, with one hand clutched to his genitalia and the other desperately thinking whether to put on his pants or close the door. The old man behind me asked mildly, yes, this young man didn't lock the door properly. What is he doing, by the way?" The young man gasped and slowly waddled to the door to try and close it. Everyone around was asking what was going on. It was rather amusing and confusing at the same time, but God, I cannot imagine to be in that fellow's shoes. I was immensely displeased that the toilet wasn't given to those who really needed it for its main purpose, for me to defecate, but I couldn't help but feel a tiny bit sorry for him. Needless to say, I thought, you know what? I'll just going to take the next train and shit at my destination. A long time ago, in an HEB grocery store, I got to witness a furious young woman dress down her boyfriend/husband like a goddamn disobedient dog. She was really laying into him, right there in the middle of the aisle, while he just stood there completely browbeaten. I think he got the wrong kind of cereal or something. "Why are you so fucking useless, Andrew?" she roared, while everyone else just sort awkwardly went about their business. It was in that moment that I decided to never become Andrew. Unfortunately, my initial solution for this was to be the perfect boyfriend, so that things like that would never happen to me. Predictably, that mostly resulted in me losing myself completely in relationships until I could no longer stand being in them. It took me ending up with a through and through abuser that simply kept ratcheting up her progressively insane demands for me to see the error in my approach. By trying to avoid becoming Andrew, I inadvertently did just that. The real secret is not in learning how to be a better dog, but in refusing to be treated like one, no matter your faults. On a domestic flight, I was sitting behind a man in his early 20s who was talking very loudly for most of an otherwise quiet trip. I think it was a connecting flight, and he had been in Bali on a jet skiing slash abseiling slash scooter holiday, which he was desperate to tell everyone about. Although he boarded alone, he was trying to engage the surrounding passengers in conversation. At one point it looked like he was getting the hint by receiving only civil but short answers from anyone he tried to talk to, but unfortunately the man next to him actually started talking with him, and the conversation lasted the whole painful trip. At one point the conversation turned to astronomy, and he said something about the sun rotating around the earth. Doesn't it? I thought it did. Yeah, pretty sure it does. Or maybe the earth goes around the moon. Yeah, not sure. Hahaha. What do you think? This last part was directed to my wife, who was sitting directly behind him. She just silently glared at him for a few seconds until he turned around and changed the subject. In addition, he smelled like he hadn't washed since before the holiday and was wearing what was once a white shirt which he had used a marker pen to write some sort of deep inspirational quote on. Something like, if you don't try something you'll never know what it's like. Like and subscribe for more edit videos.